Hello everyone, I'm Bo from Brutal Commentary, and today I'm going to be breaking down our next matchup for UFC Fight Night 269. Now, important note real quick, this was originally supposed to be the main card opener. They kind of shift the bout orders, so instead Bruno Silva versus Charles Johnson is going to be the main card opener. And this fight now will be the second to last prelim. But with that out of the way, let's talk about the fight. We have Vitor Petrino taking on Steven Asplund. I'm actually looking forward to this fight a lot. I know it's heavyweight, but I'm actually really intrigued by this. Now, this is short notice for Asplund. It was originally supposed to be Vitor Petrino versus Kennedy Nzechukwu. And now, but Asplund got the call, and this is a real good chance for Asplund because if he beats Vitor Petrino, in his second UFC fight, he will beat a top 15 fighter because I'm pretty sure Vitor is ranked number 15th in the world right now. Now, looking at these two, starting with Steven Asplund, he's currently 8-1 as a pro, 7-1 as a pro, 4-1 in his last 5 fights. His last loss was a year and a half ago. What am I saying? A year and a half ago against Denzel Freeman, which I know. Denzel Freeman looked terrible against Josh Hockett, but Josh Hockett's really good. And since then, Steven Asplund has improved much better. A nice 4-fight win streak, all by finish, which includes his UFC debut against Sean Sharaf, which, honestly speaking, that was a great performance by Steven Asplund. I think he made a lot of fans out of that performance as his style is fun to watch, the fight was really good, and the post-fight interview was pretty inspiring. Steven Asplund seems to have a really good following, and it's all just his story, really obese, eventually just trained and got in much better shape, and eventually worked his way up to here now. But now he has a real test with him in Vitor Petrino. Now for Petrino, he's currently 13-2 as a professional, 3-2 in his last 5 fights. Now Petrino used to be a light heavyweight, which included a win over Tyson Pedro, which was exactly 2 years ago. Then suffered the first and second loss of his career because Petrino was undefeated when entering the UFC. And then he suffered his first loss when he got submitted by Anthony Smith at UFC 301. Then got knocked out bad by Dustin Jacoby. So Petrino decided to move up to heavyweight, and so far it has bared a lot of fruit, as Petrino is now on a 2-fight win streak, both by finish, submitting Austin Lane, and then most recently, last October, knocking out Thomas Peterson. This is going to be very fun. I mean, granted, you'll have to look at the weigh-ins, but the difference in body type is going to be pretty comical because Vitor Petrino is pretty big for the weight class, even though he's the 205er, while Steven Asplund, obviously, he still has room to improve his physicality, but right now, it's clear who the better athlete is. But with that said, let's get down to the breakdown. Starting with Vitor Petrino. He's one of the most physically imposing athletes in this matchup. Originally, like I said, fighting at light heavyweight, but even at light heavyweight, Petrino was big and powerful. Now that he's moved up to heavyweight, he's even more comfortable physically. Strength, and I would say the biggest weapon of Petrino is definitely his strength. He's explosive, physically strong in clinch situations, and very capable in grappling exchanges. Including at light heavyweight, he had some good submissions, like against Marcin Prachnio, when he got the arm triangle. Oh, and then, like I said, Austin Lane, where he got that easy rear naked choke. Oh, I would say Petrino's grappling is pretty underrated. As Petrino has shown good submissions and strong control once he gets the fight to the ground. And against many heavyweights, that grappling advantage he has alone is enough to win. However, there is a concern that I have for him. Cardio. Because you saw in the last fight with Thomas Peterson, which I understand he knocked out Thomas Peterson pretty viciously. But in rounds 2 and 3, he was sucking wind pretty badly. And that is a bit of a concern. To be fair, it seemed like cardio was a bit of Petrino's issue, even in like some lackadaisical wins, like against Tyson Pedro. Granted, that didn't really come into play against Anthony Smith, where Petrino pulled a low fight IQ move where Smith went for a guillotine and Petrino just picked him up instead of moved to side control. But against Dustin Jacoby, you kind of saw him get tired, but up until he got knocked out in the third round. So just a suggestion that if opponents could possibly drag Petrino into deeper waters, his explosiveness does seemingly fade. But still, he has power late. He can knock out people in the third round. But against Steven Asplund, that might be a bit of a problem. Here's why. For Steven Asplund, now granted, he's 7-1, right? Not much to go off of. But what I can tell you is he's pretty durable and has pretty good output for a heavyweight. Now, in his Contender Series fight, Asplund showed legitimate knockout power where he just knocked out his opponent in about, 15 seconds. But from what I've seen, at least in the UFC debut, Asplund's style is more of a boxing-heavy approach. It really reminds me more of Nick Diaz the more I think about it. I know during the Sharaf fight, people were saying the heavyweight Max Holloway. I tend to disagree just because Holloway incorporates more kicks. In this case, I thought Nick Diaz was a more appropriate. Very boxing-heavy, not one-shot power or not going for a single strike that's going to knock your opponent out. Accumulative damage. Just throwing a lot of punches, maintaining pressure, and gradually breaking opponents down over time, just simply through volume and pace. And now, well, like I said, the Denzel Freeman loss, I should say, is definitely a little damning. It was because Steven Asplund did make a mistake when he was trying to get up, where as he was getting up, Freeman quickly grabbed his back and applied the rear naked choke. I do like to think that Steven Asplund has improved his submission awareness or submission defense a lot since that fight. It was a year and a half ago. But against Vitor Petrino, who's going to be a much better submission artist than Denzel Freeman, there are some concerns here for sure. Now, looking at how it goes stylistically, the fight, I think, likely comes down to the early rounds, specifically rounds 1 and then the first half of round 2. Because Petrino is going to be much, much more dangerous in round 1 than in comparison to round 3, in my opinion, because he's going to be fresher. He's stronger, more explosive, and capable of finishing fights quickly with either strikes or grappling. And if he catches Asplund early or secures dominant position on the ground, the fight could end pretty quickly. But if Asplund survives the initial storm, I think the dynamic is going to shift towards him. As if Asplund can keep pushing a high pace, defend the takedowns, and force Petrino to defend strikes and constantly work, especially moving on the back foot, the cardio advantages are probably going to show for Steven Asplund much more than Petrino. So when you look at it, Petrino is probably the more dangerous fighter, especially in the first round. His strength, grappling, and explosiveness gives him a clear path to victory. But if Asplund can weather that storm and push the fight into later rounds, I think things could swing in his favor because his high volume striking with pretty good endurance from what we've seen can be very difficult to deal with once an opponent who has more power than him begins to fade or their cardio starts to fail them. And if Petrino slows down the way he did in his last fight, I think Asplund will do much better in taking advantage of that than Thomas Peterson. So, once again, for my official prediction, I'm going to go with Steven Asplund. I'm going to pick the underdog in this one. I really like his style in this specific matchup. Styles make fights at the end of the day. And I think while Petrino, that first round is going to really scare me because he could knock out Steven Asplund or submit him. I could see it happening. But I really trust that Steven Asplund's worked on that defensive wrestling and grappling of his and has good durability, good striking defense. And I think he's going to push a pace on Vitor Petrino and eventually en route to a second round TKO. Late TKO. So, once again, I'm going to pick Steven Asplund and I'm going to pick him via late TKO. Probably somewhere in the third round if I had to guess. But, with that being said, that has been my prediction of this fight. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below on who you think is going to win. But until then, I have been Bo from Brutal Commentary. I thank you all for listening. And remember, stay calm, stay respectful, and enjoy the violence. I'll see y'all next time.